price you pay to pursue your dreams. Grinding every day to get that dream. Ain't no holding back until you get your shot. One day you're gonna open your eyes and be on top. That's the price you pay to pursue your dreams. Grinding every day to get that dream. Ain't no holding back until you get your shot. One day you're gonna open your eyes and be on top. Been playing this game since I was 10 years of age. I wanted to make my mark ever since my Pop Warner days. When I strapped that helmet, I'm knocking dudes into a blaze. A lockdown corner going all the way through 7th and 8th grade. Entering high school, I'm ready to write another page. Busting my ass and lifting weights. It's a much higher level, but I'm still making plays. No time to party or bask in my glory days. It's college preparatory classes every single day. Living my life with that singular goal. It's the fire inside that makes me whole. Looking in the mirror, my muscles swole. I'm on a mission, and I'm never gonna stop. When the ball's in the air like Sherman, I'm a hawk. And I promise I'll overcome whatever life throws at me. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ageless Movement Podcast. I'm your co-host, Scott Lohman.
I'm saying Porner.
You're probably wondering, why am I wearing sunglasses? Do we have a sponsor? Is that why I'm wearing these sunglasses, these Maui Gyms?
That would be nice if they were our sponsor.
Yeah, that'd be freaking awesome, wouldn't it?
Not just for sun.
Yeah, exactly. Not just for sun. So, the reason why I'm wearing these sunglasses, and it's going to pertain to next week's topic, which is going to be migraine headaches. So, I get migraines from time to time. It's very random. And most of the time, it's just a sparkler show. They call that the aura. And then other times, a headache follows. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes I get really bad headaches, and I don't get the actual migraine headache where I see the sparkler show. But today's one of those days. I don't really have the headache, but I did get the sparklers. So that's why I'm wearing the sunglasses. We have, studio lighting in here so you all can see us very clearly. And that's not the best thing to look into when you're having an aura. So that explains it. And we're giving away next week's topic early on. All right. So what are we talking about this week? Oh, and before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe to our video. It helps build our channel, and we like to get our message out there because this is probably the most significant time in history where we have the most information available to us, yet there's so much misinformation. And that's partly why we started this podcast, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so what is our topic for today?
Our topic today is maintaining health even during or when you've gotten your immunization shot.
Yes, your vaccines. And we're not just talking about the COVID vaccine, we're talking about all vaccines. And we've got some interesting information for you, so this is going to come as a big surprise. Exercise and eating right makes the vaccine more effective. So, and also the more unhealthy you are, of course, it's going to become less effective. So let's dive into this. All right, so this is pretty interesting. So we actually have a piece of terminology to describe how your immune system ages. And, it shouldn't be of any surprise to anyone because obviously when you're, 80, 85 years old, you don't run as fast as you did when you were 20. Did you know that?
Yeah, I was going to say for this specific topic, even the amount of muscle you have already starts to, you start to lose muscle like in your 30s.
Oh, now that's really interesting. That you just brought up something that was a part of my thesis when I was in college, actually in grad school.
Yes.
So the term sarcopenia was kind of a new term when I was writing my field study for my thesis. And I can tell you right now, it's vastly different between men and women. So I'm just going to throw this information out there because I remember all the research. I did a lot of this research. So typically, a woman achieves maximal muscle mass around 18 years of age. The shocking part for women is they lose 1% per year of muscle mass, and they replace it with 1% of fat per year. So essentially, every woman, past 18, every year past 18, they put on 1% of body fat and they lose 1% of muscle. So, and by the time they're 25, they lose a significant amount of muscle mass. And it's interesting because you might see someone who graduated high school, you see them after college, and we're talking about a typical person that's not really physically active. Of course, we're not talking about people that exercise daily, that maintain their muscle mass, that lift weights. We're really talking about the sedentary population, which so many people are. By the time a woman's 25, there's a significant loss of muscle mass, and that muscle mass is replaced by body fat essentially. And you may not immediately notice a big difference when you see that person because their weight may not change that much. I mean, think about it. If you graduated at 125 pounds, and we're talking, the difference of maybe 7 years after you graduate high school, you lost 7% of your muscle mass. You put on, you replaced all that, those 7% of muscle mass with 7% of fat. You may weigh the same, but your body composition looks different. And you might say, oh, so-and-so put on a little bit of weight, but it doesn't really highlight what the very significant problem is. It's the loss of muscle mass. And that replacement, where did that mass go? What was it replaced with? Fat. And for those of you that aren't really sure what muscle mass really is, it's just essentially contractile protein. What makes muscles look great and thick and very cut, so to speak, and shapely is the protein that you build when you lift weights or you do any type of strength work. And what essentially happens is, think of it as a cross bridge. So your contractile protein, they're called myofibrils, actin and myosin protein. They connect, and when you work out, you break it up. And that's why you oftentimes will experience muscle soreness after a workout. Now what happens, the body repairs itself. That protein repairs and comes back with a thicker, stronger cross-section. That's called your actin and myosin. So it isn't so much that you build larger muscle, you just build more protein in your muscle. That's the best way I would explain it. And thank God for editing, because I kind of made a mess of the earlier part. Okay, so how does this relate to what we're witnessing here? Well, as we know, muscle mass decreases with age. Oh, and I forgot one point I wanted to throw in there. Men tend to lose their muscle mass pretty much all at once around retirement age, whereas women tend to lose it shortly after high school, which is kind of disturbing, but that just seems to be the trend with women. And then, women get into real trouble too when they get into menopause because, you don't have the same hormones anymore. The estrogen really protects your body. Those of you that are women out there, and even men, we have a certain amount of estrogen as well. It's good for cardiovascular health. And for men, we go through adrenopause, which happens later in life after retirement age, closer to the 60s, right? And so many men, but it isn't just the hormone change. What you have to understand about men is we fluctuate a lot with our hormones within a course of a day. But what's really interesting about with men is men tend to become a lot less active after retirement. And that is essentially what is the undoing of men at that point. They just don't have the physical activity. They're not moving as much. So they lose a lot more muscle mass, and then all these other changes start to happen as a result of that. And this graph bears it out. So there's a term for, so basically with age, they call this in the art, in fact, this is ICCA, I should say. Great International Council on Active Aging. I went to one of their first ones, which was in 2005, 2006. So it was their second annual Active Aging Week I went to in Vegas. And what they're talking about here is there's a natural functional decline in physiological systems, including immunity. So this is something that goes along with the aging process. There's progressive reduction, also called immunosenescence. I said it right. Immunosenescence. Remember that. That's the word you're going to learn today. Like Sesame Street. This episode was brought to you by immunosenescence. And what that basically is, it just talks about how your immune system becomes less capable of fighting foreign invaders, like the coronavirus, like influenza. And these are all the things that really impact your immune system. And what's really interesting is your physical activity and your nutrition will maximize your immunity. Now, not just your own immunity, but the effectiveness of immunizations like vaccines. Vaccines like the Pfizer and Moderna, the coronavirus vaccines, like the influenza vaccines. All of those are going to become a lot more effective if you adhere to all these following stress factors. So they're talking about physical activity and nutrition. They're talking about making sure you maintain your muscle mass. Sarcopenia is listed here. That's loss of muscle mass as we age. Skin atrophy, that's another interesting thing. Reduced mucosal function. Genetics. Everyone talks about genetics, like genetics is everything. Like you have no choice over everything because your genetics controls everything. No, genetics is just potential. And as you can see, it's only one factor among, what is that? 5 factors. 5 major factors? 6 major factors. Thank you. Okay, so also comorbidities. If you are, physiological stress happens from inflammation, as you know. When you're overweight, when your body will tend to have adrenal problems. You'll secrete too much cortisol, which causes loss of muscle mass, which isn't good for your body and your overall health. And it can lead to weight gain. Putting on a sudden amount of body fat. Frailty, which again is really the direct result of sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass. All right?
I forgot. Drugs.
Yes, drugs. Oh my goodness. That is very important. And that's a whole other episode that we could talk about in the future. As the effect of these long-term medications that people take on their health. Granted, you and I have some pretty strong opinions about statin drugs, which are cholesterol-lowering drugs. The unfortunate part about it is they have a lot of side effects, and they result in losses of muscle mass and a lot of other problems. And we've actually worked with people that were victims, and I say yes, victims of statin drugs and the effects that they could have on the impact that they can have on your body that's negative, which includes a massive loss of muscle mass. So, anything you want to add to that?
No.
So, it's absolutely important that you maintain your muscle mass. And, they talk about in this article, and you can look it up yourself, it's ICCA, they talk about the importance of physical exercise. Now, they just mentioned brisk walking 3 times a week. Now, you and I have a little different opinions about that. I believe in walking. We both believe in walking, provided you have proper walking mechanics. But we really believe in strengthening your muscle mass because I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to maintain all your muscle mass if all you're doing is walking. It's going to help. It's going to help your butt and hamstrings, especially if you're walking up hills. But your upper body, your whole posterior chain is going to get a lot stronger if you actually work on it with weight. Meaning doing some type of deadlift where you're pulling weight off the ground or you're swinging weight, whatever it is you prefer to do. In any kind of pulling movement where you're working all your back muscles and extensor movements, which strengthens that serratus muscle, which is so important for shoulder health. Including muscle mass and, strength training exercises. And, Sang and I talk about this all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to a gym, quote unquote, and lift weights there. You can do body weight training. If you can do pull-ups or push-ups, body weight squats, or even you could hold a Bulgarian bag or anything that's a bag of cement will work, I guess. I've never done that, but yeah, all of those things help build muscle mass. Also, and generally, I don't recommend a lot of ballistic training for people that are older just because people have worn their meniscus down quite a bit by that age, and jumping and landing isn't always the best thing. But if somebody's conditioned well enough to actually do it and they're a good mover, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that as far as exercise?
Yeah, so Scott mentions that ballistics. I mean, that's pretty much how I started, was in doing ballistics. So I think as long as you start at a younger age, you can just keep going, because you know how it feels and what is right and what isn't. But yeah, the plyometrics needs to be decreased, probably. Yeah. But I still ask in class for people to do like these little baby hops, in order to just get used to the idea of like being up in the air and being able to land. I mean, I don't ask that they jump over a box.
You don't have to be Carl Lewis.
Yeah, but,
Bob Beeman.
being able to land. And then what happens is also that impact kind of helps also with bone health. So it's just kind of, everybody has to just do what is within their capability.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. I can't stress to you enough how important it is to jump and land, even if it's just a little teeny jump and land. That impact actually is really important for bone remodeling, especially in your pelvic region and your femurs and all those important areas where you want to maintain your bone mass, as well as building muscle mass. You don't have to do anything colossal to build muscle or to maintain muscle mass for those of you that are already pretty fit. Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, anything else we want to add to that article? Oh yeah, in preparing for COVID-19 vaccinations, researchers at the Irish Longitudinal Study on Aging, TILDA, at Trinity College released a report providing information on influenza flu vaccine uptake and health factors behaviors that govern vaccine efficiency. Their report provides evidence on the positive effect of prolonged physical activity on boosting antibody responses following vaccinations in older adults. The report recommends adults age 60 and older should consistently incorporate some form of aerobic exercise, such as a brisk walk, at least 2 to 3 times per week, and in the weeks and months prior to the vaccination. But you should be doing that anyway. And you should be doing some type of strength training component to this. And I think at least 3 times a week. 4 to 5 would be better.
Everybody's different.
See, to me, walking is a good thing to do when you're not working on your strength training.
Yeah.
That's your day off should be walking. All right. Okay, here's an interesting part of nutrition. What do we talk about a lot with nutrition? We talk about protein, don't we?
Yeah.
A lot of Americans, it's not that they don't eat protein, it's what they eat with the protein where they get in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm. Or I think how the protein is cooked.
True, yeah. And obviously not eating fried protein and not eating too many carbs with it. Eating things that actually grow out of the ground that are in its most natural state, such as vegetables and fruits, are good to eat with protein. Many older adults do not eat enough protein. That's interesting.
And you and I actually even go a little bit further in trying to make sure that our protein comes from a good source and is high quality.
Yeah.
So that's what most people don't talk about. Is,
sure.
That your meat is grass fed. I mean, like our eggs, I prefer the pasteurized.
We get free range. I mean, the worst eggs we're ever going to eat are free range.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get the pasteurized eggs, you said?
Well, I mean, yeah, they're free range.
Yeah,
free range.
They're all free range. We like chickens that are happy to eat.
Yeah.
Well, not just the chicken, but their eggs too.
Really interesting video about the chickens that they used for the Costco special, which was really gross.
So they were all in cages and stuff?
No, they weren't in cages, but they're a certain breed, and they're bred 6 times faster than they should be. That's how they get to be all nice and plump in those containers.
Oh, interesting.
And not only that, the farm that they're at, they're so packed that, when one becomes so big, they start to trample each other because the one who's so big actually can't move very well. And then, I watched the skin damage that happened as a result. It was gnarly.
Pretty gross, huh?
I'll never eat a chicken, that $5 chicken from Costco anymore.
Yeah, you want to skip that.
I'll be going to Whole Foods and paying double. It's fine.
There you go. Yeah. That's a good point. Vitamins are important. You should take a multivitamin. Can't go wrong there. Whatever you overconsume, your body will get rid of. But you should really try to eat foods that are high in all these vitamins. Of course, eating fruits, eating especially like blueberries and strawberries, they're very high in antioxidants. They have a lot of vitamins in them. Eating broccoli. If you don't like broccoli, you got cauliflower. There's calcium in that as well. Yeah, vitamin D, that's sun. But taking a vitamin D supplement can be good.
Although this past week, Scott and I have been debating about that one.
It's a little confusing because what we've learned is if you take too much vitamin D, you overconsume it, your muscles get kind of tight. And
it calcifies.
Yeah, they calcify. And that's probably not the best thing for your body. So, probably the best thing to do is to get a blood test and find out what you're deficient in. And, that can be a whole different podcast within itself. This guy, Victor Conti, who started Balco Labs, who was very infamous, right? He was involved in the whole designer, steroids and everything. But before he got involved in that, the guy had a great lab where you would go there, he'd draw your blood, he'd find out exactly what you were deficient in, and they give you a supplement routine based on what your blood test said, which is the way to go because all of us are very different as far as what our needs are. Our nutritional needs can vary quite a bit. Okay, this is another one, hydration. How much do we talk about hydration, and how often do our clients and students not want to drink water? Water is the most healthiest thing you can put in your body. It's the most essential thing that your body needs.
In fact, like even
drink up.
I have a client who, same thing. We'd start talking about water, and then he asked me about a specific brand of water, and I went to look at it, and it took me a little bit of digging, and It turns out it had an artificial sugar in it. So it kind of makes me wonder a little because my client also has a little bit of, how should we call it? Possibly dementia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, having the artificial sugar does not help.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's Splenda and all these other artificial sugars. They've been proven in various abstracts and medical studies that they actually increase your chance of getting cancer. I would definitely try to cut that out. And here's the thing. A little bit of sugar is a lot better than these sugar replacements. I mean, if you just can't help yourself, have some dark chocolate with your blueberries and strawberries. That's very healthy. And you're going to get that sugary treat that your body desires. And, fruit is a great way to satisfy a lot of that because there's natural sugar in there called fructose. And you get all these vitamins and minerals, vitamins especially like vitamin C, in your fruits, especially your fruits. Vegetables, you have a lot of different vitamins as well, but they're not as tasty, of course, as fruit. And fruit's easy to eat. It's not like you don't have to hold your nose to eat blueberries or strawberries or bananas or apples. I guess some people might, but most people like berries. They're pretty tasty. Yeah. And if you can handle the acidity, grapefruit, oranges, they're very good as well. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, eat your nutrition. Don't just take it in a pill. And we also learned a lot about mushrooms this weekend as well.
Oh yeah, I love mushrooms.
Mushrooms are very, very healthy. Shiitake mushrooms are extremely important. There's another mushroom called lion's mane. It's supposed to be really good for cognition. And I think we'll delve into that in future podcasts. We'll talk about, the benefit of mushrooms. And mushrooms are really an interesting topic. They're in many ways, they're like the lichen is basically the fascia of the planet, so to speak. Everything has lichen in it. Trees, plants, humans, animals, we all need it and we share it. Okay, anything else we want to bring up from this article? Looks like we're good there.
Yep.
All right, a couple other things I want to talk about. So I don't know. Well, you've probably noticed things have changed this week as far as our COVID infections. ICU numbers continue to drop. Infection rates get lower and lower. I believe San Joaquin, where we live, is now down to 4.1%. I'm not sure what San Mateo County is, but I would guess it's even lower than here. And I would imagine Santa Clara County would be even lower than San Mateo County. It's hard to get these numbers up to date. Unless somebody reports on it in the news, most of the data that you're going to read about is usually going to be a couple weeks old. It's not real time. Unless they send it out in an alert or something like that. I have a hard time finding that data in real time. Okay, so I noticed a lot of changes this week. So the gyms have reopened, commercial gyms. They started actually 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I believe. Something like that.
Yeah, actually.
I believe it was 3 because
started going.
I've been working out for 2 weeks in the gym, and I know for a fact it was already open for a week before. So I'm going to say 3 weeks. And, 24-hour fitness kind of has their own way of doing things. You would reserve a time for an hour. You're only allowed an hour. And you'd go in there and you'd work out with a maximum, I believe, of 56 people. And this was in San Carlos's 24-hour fitness, which is quite a big gym, by the way. It could easily accommodate 200 people without any problem. And they were only allowing 56 in, which makes a lot of sense. The only thing I didn't like about what they were doing, they had a cleaning bottle and 4 of them in the whole place. And you'd have to get a paper towel. I would bring in my own disinfectant and my own towel, and I would wipe things down before and after, because that's just how I do things. It's worked for me as a personal trainer. No one's gotten sick around me, and wearing your mask, of course. And when I was at Powerhouse Gym, I haven't been there yet since gyms have reopened, but I was there when they were open again in the summer, and they gave us a disinfectant bottle and a towel, which I thought was spectacular. And you didn't have to reserve a time there, but I noticed not too many people ever came in at once, so that was never an issue for them. So a lot of things have changed. Bars have opened now. Restaurants have opened. You mentioned on Friday that Disneyland plans to open soon. So I'm a little bit disturbed by that. I don't know about you. And the reason why I'm disturbed, I'm very happy that the COVID numbers have come down dramatically and that ICUs are no longer impacted currently. What I am nervous about is these variants, especially the B117 variant, which is the UK variant, which has gone through several variants since it's left the UK and come to America. And in California, we know there's a Southern California variant, which is a variant of the B117. So what I'm nervous about is, if you look at the data, the older data, 3 months ago, it's actually mirroring what happened in Europe. And if you're not paying attention to what happened in Europe, I'm just going to give it to you in a really kind of a brief synopsis here. What happened was, as the numbers started to decline in Europe, and I'm specifically talking about Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, Britain, Ireland, that whole area. I guess Ireland's part of Britain. Okay. Those numbers started to precipitously decline. So what did these countries do? They started lowering restrictions. They did still enforce a mask mandate. Now here's where it got really interesting. For some reason, Britain's numbers started to increase slowly, while France's and Italy started to continue to decline. And then after about 3 months, all of a sudden, actually less than that, it was about 8 weeks, 2 months, when in Britain, the B117 variant was identified, and suddenly for the next 2 months, Britain had to go into lockdown. And you might say, well, there wasn't as many cases in London as there was, say, in New York or wherever. You got to remember, there's a lot less people in Britain than in America. We have 325 million people living here. So, and we're 40 million of us are in California alone. So you could see how this could get really out of hand very quickly. So Britain basically had to lock down for a couple months. And when I say lock down, they literally had to shut everything down just about, except bare essential things, food. And I'm worried that we're heading in this direction. And if you listen to Dr. Osterholm, one of the things that he talked about from SIDRAP, one of the things he talked about was he was very worried about the race to vaccinate. And what I mean by that is, and what he means by it is, the rate of infection of that B117 seems to outpace the speed in which we can get needles in people's arms to vaccinate. So he had a very interesting idea. He said, instead of spreading that Pfizer and Moderna injections from 28 days and 30 days, because that's all the peer review, all the stages of trials had everyone, I know for Pfizer, at 28 days, and I think Moderna was 30. Close enough. They're all about the same, a month. What Dr. Osterholm was saying was he was bringing to the table something completely different. He's saying, well, why don't we spread it out to 3 months? Because the data is already showing once you get your first shot of Pfizer and Moderna, you have a lot of immunity. You have a lot of protection. You're not going to end up in a hospital, most likely, or on your deathbed. That's great news. But to really ensure that you don't get the deadly effects of this virus, or any of the side effects of this virus, they have the second injection. Well, what Dr. Osterholm was talking about is, why don't we spread it out to 3 months? Because the benefit of that is you actually lengthen the terms of your immunity, and you get more people vaccinated. Because what he worried about, and it got me worrying as I thought about it, I found his argument very compelling, that the 32 through 55-year-old population, in many ways, we're the most vulnerable because we're out there working. And we come from multi-generational households, most of us. Yep. We do right now, us. My father's 92 years old, and thankfully, he got his second vaccination. But what you worry about is this population in our age group and younger, so essentially millennials and Gen Xers, and young baby boomers, we're really at risk for all of this, and we're not on the list yet because we're not 65 and over. So, Dr. Osterholm gave a great metaphor. What if you have grandma and grandpa at the table, and you have 2 doses of Pfizer? What are you going to do? Are you going to vaccinate grandma? Or are you going to vaccinate grandpa? Why not give 1 injection to both? Right? It's a very good suggestion, because even if it takes 3 months to get the production apparatus up to the point of where you could start getting second injections to all these Americans that had their first, I think it's worth it. And I think the immunity is going to be even better. But because the trials didn't include that, Dr. Fauci and company are very reluctant to go that direction. But what's really interesting is, I've noticed this week, Dr. Fauci's been kind of echoing the things that Dr. Osterholm's been talking about, which is the rising cases of the B117 variant in many states, including Texas and Florida and California. And you really worry about Texas because Abbott got rid of the mask law. In Florida, they don't have the mask law either, huh?
Well, I don't know. Well, they never really had...
They didn't have much of anything.
They were never big on the mask anyway, but I guess everybody's going down there for spring break.
Fun times. More young people now to spread this around. And that's the scary part, is the young people, for the most part, aren't going to get deathly ill. Mm-hmm. But but let's be real. Most of these people are going to see their parents at some point, or older people, or maybe they work with people that are older. They're going to put them at risk. Mm-hmm. And with many laws, I believe it was 32 states have dropped their universal mask requirements. Now it's a free-for-all. And I'm deeply worried, actually, because this is so frustrating. We only have a month left before we can really get most of the country vaccinated.
Almost there.
Yeah, almost there. I think we would reach herd immunity in a month to a month and a half. At the rate we're going, because the vaccine rollout's really starting to move along at this point. It's working a lot better. And God, can you just hang on for March? I'm really worried about March. March, I think, is the most important month through all of this. Yeah, but getting through it is going to be brutal. March and April, these are the most pivotal months ahead for us. So that's where we're at right now.
You didn't talk about the second half of that.
What was the second half?
That Dr. Osterholm talks about how in Minneapolis, now there are groups of children who are now contracting COVID.
You're right. I forgot about
and
that.
Nobody in the news is really talking about it. We wouldn't have known about it. He happens to live in that area, which is why he follows it. He follows everything. But, that's starting to happen too now in one little spot. So we're about to open up pretty much everything. We've already seen it. And, if you're a part of Redwood City, last time I looked in that catalog, it looks like they're going to have children's camp.
Yeah, and that's what's so disturbing about all of this, because we're human beings, for some reason, we just make the same mistakes over and over again. We never seem to learn from our past. If you don't know your past, you don't know your future. And what really scares me is Britain went through the same thing, right? Everything seems hunky-dory right now because the numbers are getting lower and lower. The problem is it's making people let their guard down and not protect themselves as these B117 variants start to infect everybody. It may be low numbers now, but in another 4 to 6 weeks, it could explode again. And we're right back where we started, and we're frustrated because we haven't finished vaccinating everyone.
Which would make all that work for nothing. Yeah,
correct. And we're talking about kids going back to school, and here's the other article you reminded me of that I read about that your friend Marisa posted. And I read this article. In Houston, they found 25 different variants in the wastewater, especially the 5 different variants that were problematic, including the South African, the Venezuelan, and the UK B117. So there you go. It's out there. People have it. People are spreading it. And as they're spreading it, we're removing more and more restrictions. And I think some of this has to do with what we've talked about earlier. A lot of politicians are feeling heat right now because of the economy, because people want to open up their businesses that aren't essential. And I get it. Believe me, I get it. This has caused the worst. Well, I think there's a lot of factors that affect the economy, but this was a big factor, I'll say, leading to the worst depression in our history. This is the worst depression we've ever lived in as a country. We're talking over 20 million people that have applied for unemployment. More than that. It's 27, it's almost 30 million. Yeah. And then if you include the people that couldn't get through the EDD, it's the real rate's probably more like 35 to 40 million. Mm-hmm. We don't know.
And then that's not to include the women who probably will not return to the workforce as a result.
Yeah.
Because somebody's got to homeschool the kids.
Correct. So we're looking at a lot of potential problems here that we can circumvent, but I think a lot of politicians, especially governors now, are feeling heat from people. So naturally, they want to open up everything. And I get it. Believe me, I get it. You want to keep your job. You don't want the economy to completely implode. But here's the thing. This is a fundamental mistake that we made early on. We should have had a UBI for everyone. We should have created an economic pause. It's not that hard. You just, no more rent during the worst part of the pandemic. No one owes a bank any mortgage. And everyone gets a UBI of like $2,500 a month. And all you need to buy with that money during that time is food, clothing, whatever it may be, essential things. And for those of you that do have money set aside and you want to buy a car or something, fine. You could use that money too. It'll help you buy a car or whatever. That helps stimulate the economy. I don't understand why we put this incredible burden on the working class of America to not work. We're telling you, don't work, but we're not going to help you out. We'll just give you a check here and there. So hopefully, obviously this new COVID stimulus bill, there's a lot of good things in there. Families that I think earn less than $55,000 that have 4 children, I believe, can earn up to $5,600. That's huge right now. And those are all good things. I praise the Biden administration for that and Congress for acting and doing something that way. But oh God, if you think this is going to take care of everything, you're not looking at reality. And we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And I'm telling you, until we get this virus under control, it's going to be very difficult to really flourish as an economy from here on out. And I'm not an economist, and I don't want to get into all of that, but you do have to talk about it a little bit when you're talking about health and this pandemic, because the two are inseparable. And I really believe we could have created an economic pause and run a UBI, even if you don't believe in a UBI. I get it. We all got different opinions about things. Some of us are fiscal conservatives. Others of us are left-wing New Deal Democrats like myself. I get it. We have different views on this stuff. But in a pandemic, in a crisis, there's certain things that you have to do to take care of the American people. Increasing the material well-being in a pandemic is the most important thing you could do for its people, because people will die of stress and starvation together. And for those of you that are a little bit skeptical, well, go look at what happened to Mayor Tubbs from Stockton. So all the reports from the study were released this week, and he's done a lot of interviews with people and media outlets over the course of last week. And all the data proved out that the $500, I think it was $600 a week, people in Stockton got.
That was $500 a month.
Oh, it was a month. I'm sorry. I meant to say a month. I didn't mean to say a week. Sorry. Yeah, $500 a month. And they actually, I don't remember exactly how many people were in the study, but it was a very significant group. And they interviewed all of them throughout the process. So it's not like they just gave you a bunch of money and that was it. They literally asked for accountability. And you know what they found?
What?
Some impressive things. Number one, people spent money on essentials, food, clothing, shoes, things like that. Not only that, it reversed the effects of depression. They say it was 10% more effective. Don't quote me on the 10%. Quote me on this. It was as effective as if they were taking Prozac in terms of how it affected depression in the people of Stockton, which of course is a working class city with very low, income compared to other cities. And it's pretty much been known over this past 2 decades as being, a higher crime place with lower incomes. And they found that the UBI was so effective, it decreased depression, like to the point of where all the people that got that money, it almost had the same effect as if everyone was written a prescription of Prozac or some type of antidepressant. Now, here's the other interesting thing. One guy was interviewed, and he said it allowed him to get a better job, because the big criticism with UBI was, it's going to foster laziness and you're not going to be motivated anymore. Well, I got news for you. $500 a month is not going to make you live like a king anywhere in America, especially in Stockton, okay? But what it did do is it created opportunities. So in one particular instance, there was a guy who was earning a minimum wage job, right? And he could never take a day off because he wouldn't be able to make his rent. So that $500 allowed him to take time off from work, not a lot of time, like we're talking 1 day out of the week, to go to a job interview, which he got, and he could quit his minimum wage job, and now he's got a higher paying job. So these are the economic constraints that many Americans have been living with prior to the pandemic. Now multiply that times 100, that's life during the pandemic for people like this. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this because economic health and well-being is important for everyone. It's part of health. Mm-hmm. If you're depressed, you're not healthy. If you're worried all the time about whether or not you're going to be able to pay your rent, or maybe you have to make a decision between health insurance or rent, and that's another good part of the COVID relief bill, is that for people that qualify, they're not even going to have to pay for their health insurance premiums. It's going to be substantially reduced to some ridiculous amount, like $25, something low. Very affordable, because most of us, I know I'm paying about close to $1,000 a month in health insurance costs. I mean, out of my pocket. Yeah. So anything else you want to add to this?
No.
We maybe didn't cover it. And thank you again for the second part of what Osterholm was talking about, because I did want to talk about these variants in wastewater and UBIs and all this stuff. This is all really important, and this is all stuff that should have been integrated into our pandemic relief plan right from the jump, but it wasn't, of course.
Yeah, and the interesting part is that Osterholm was part of that team, where so the discussion was had. However, for whatever reason, he's in the minority.
Yeah.
So, how, why, which we tried to discover, or we tried to figure out this week, but couldn't figure out. So at this point, like, we just listened to him directly.
Yeah, he clears up a lot. And what we ran into, and I'll talk about this in future podcasts. I talked to a biotech person who shall remain anonymous that gave me a lot of interesting information, stuff that I suspected all along, but I couldn't prove because I didn't have the data for, is true. It's looking like Pfizer and Moderna, these messenger RNA vaccines, are very effective at fighting COVID-19 because it attacks that glycoprotein spike, which binds to your cell. Now, what he did warn me about is with these variants, the protein compositions are constantly changing. Now, as long as they change and that glycoprotein spike doesn't change, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines should be very effective. Where you get nervous is when maybe something else changes with the composition of the coronavirus. For instance, maybe there's a fatty layer in the virus itself that could create another barrier. Then at that point, the virus can survive. And if it does survive these vaccines, now we got to go back to square one. And this is why we shouldn't play around with this, with these B117 variants. We should just buckle down, get as many of these vaccines in our arms, and just keep our guard up, wear our mask. At the very least, you can do that. You can open up gyms. Hell, you can open up Disneyland. Just please wear a mask. That's it. You can eat outdoors. Most people are outdoors at Disneyland anyway. You can spread the tables out. It can be done. I agree. With the mask. Oh, I want to end on that. Anything else you want to add?
The only thing I was going to say, based on that last comment of yours, basically time was not on our side.
You're
because
right.
The more difficult we make this, the more time the virus can adapt, basically. But two, running around and making yourself potentially a host,
bad idea.
Is also not a good idea, but that's what's happening. So,
and for those of you that don't understand, when we run around and spread the virus, that's how it adapts and changes. It mutates based on finding multiple hosts. If I can prevent myself from being a host from this person or that person, then it can't mutate. It can't change. But if we keep spreading it around each other, guess what? It's going to change. And this is what we have to prevent. So even if your governor is telling you you don't have to wear a mask, they're full of shiza. Wear a mask. Just do it. Take care of yourself, please. Don't let yourself get roped into the insanity of humanity in America. Just stay focused. And think of your fellow human being, please.
And the other part that we didn't talk about
Kindness.
either was my question to our
biotech expert, yes.
Right, was that nobody talks about these long hauler symptoms and what to expect. So, one, you don't want to get COVID, and if you survive, who knows what kind of things you're going to have to deal with after. So.
And we've talked about that in length. Those of you that get COVID oftentimes get myocarditis, which isn't permanent as far as we know, which is good. But then you have the brain fog. You have the permanent change in your brain function that happens. And believe me, you don't want that. We know instructors that are very highly intelligent people that still are experiencing brain fog. How many months out? 4, 5, 6?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? November. I have somebody who's still talking about it, and another one before she got hers actually very early on. She lived in New York. I haven't spoken to her in a while, but yeah, hers was at least 5, 6 months out.
Yeah.
And she's a doctor. Like, I'm not saying she's not just kind of your lay person. Like, she knows how to protect herself. Unfortunately, a patient came in and she somehow contracted COVID and has been dealing with it.
And that's the scary part about that, right? The amount of exposure is crucial with COVID. We learned this early on. It's one thing to say walk into a store and maybe one person has it, and if you got your mask on and you're not sharing air, there's a lower chance of you getting it. However, if you're in an ICU and there's COVID all over the place, then even with all the PPE, there's still a good chance that it's going to get in and infect you. And then the amount of exposure you get to COVID also impacts how sick you get in many cases. So please, just keep doing what you're doing. We're almost at the end here. That's the frustrating part.
When you say keep doing what you're doing, if that's anything like yesterday when we were in Livermore, just because you wear the mask does not mean you wear the mask underneath your nose.
Yes, chin diapers are not going to help, okay?
No, hers was over her mouth.
It's still a chin diaper to me if your nose is hanging out. I like to pluck people in the nose to do that. I wish that was my job. I was paid by the city to go like that to people's noses.
Livermore could hire you to, they're at least finding $100 violation.
Hire me.
Go look for it.
Yeah, and give me $100 every time I pluck a nose. That would be great. I'd be very wealthy. Okay, so anything else you want to add to that?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, we're out of here. Next week we're going to talk about migraines. We got a lot of great topics ahead for you, okay? Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care of yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Ageless Movement Podcast. Ageless Movement. Take care, everyone. Stay healthy.